Hi everyone, Olive here, and welcome to my least planned video yet on BookTube. And the reason why I say it that way is that I am an obsessive planner, but for some reason in the last week or so I've become a very lazy reader, which is very out of character for me, but Rose is in a massive reading rut right now, so maybe she has contaminated me, or maybe I'm still a little bit upset that it is mid-May and freezing in Toronto. I think an extension of this has made me be super indecisive about what kind of video to film for you this week. About 5 minutes ago, I had the incredible idea to think, hey, if I'm being a lazy reader right now, what books on my bookshelf are the most indicative of my laziness? Or in other words, what books have been sitting on my bookshelf the longest? Let's get started. Number 1 is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. So I'm not sure if Rose knows that I've never read Pride and Prejudice before. I honestly can't remember because I know I've tried to hide that from her for a while. So if she didn't know before, maybe she does. She knows now. And like I said, I've always meant to read Pride and Prejudice. I don't know why this is so funny. But in all seriousness, I love Jane Austen. Jane Austen's a fantastic author. Our book club book right now is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. So it's really nothing against Jane Austen. I feel like it's one of those things where I've meant to read it for so long and I don't want to admit that I've never read it. Anytime someone mentions the name Mr. Darcy and expects some sort of reaction from me, I'll just thoughtfully look into the distance and nod my head in agreement, pretty much. And moving right along, next book that I can't believe I have never read is Les Mis by Victor Hugo. And I adored this movie. I really knew nothing about Les Mis until I saw the musical when it came out in, I think, 2012, oh man, 5 years ago, and I just fell in love with it. I can sing you every song by heart, but it is actually a book, which little me at the time did not realize for a while. The reason why I have not tackled it yet is this reason, as well as the fact that knowing the musical, it is very depressing. Next book up is The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini, I'm gonna guess is how you pronounce his last name. This book has been around since 2003. I've always seen it, always meant to read it, as well as The Thousand Splendid Suns. It's just something I haven't really gotten into, and actually this past year I've started getting into more fiction from Middle East, and I actually really should read this soon because that's a theme I've been really reading since about February now. But I mean, the content of this book really still speaks to some of the things going on today in that part of the world, as well as I've just heard that this author is an absolutely fabulous storyteller, so it's definitely on my TBR in the next few months. And please let me know what you think about it, because I've heard that it is quite hard to read, however, very timely and very powerful as well. The last of my fiction books that I am ashamed to say I have not read is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Russian fiction is not something I've really ever delved too deeply in until the start of this year, so I feel that, much like The Kite Runner, now is the time for me to begin to think about tackling this book. This is another monster of a book. And let me just say that big books have never inspired fear in me. However, I think since going to grad school, big books make me think of how many complex connections and content that I should be picking up on. So I think it's more so out of fear for missing the point or missing some really important arguments in a book that make me a little bit more hesitant of larger books now. I don't know. Now it's time for some non-fiction. Surprise, surprise, it is all about female empowerment. First up is Ambition is Not a Dirty Word by Deborah Condren. Admittedly, this book was a complete impulse purchase from, I believe it was one of my favorite bookstores here in Toronto. Oh no, it was from bookoutlet.ca. A source of great weakness for me personally. I bought this book very shortly after reading Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. I was very inspired by Sheryl Sandberg's book and was really thinking a lot at the time, and continue to, about women in the workplace and women trying to push forward for equality. A lot of people now think that, oh, women have the vote, oh, women are equals in the workplace and in life, every general day life. General day. Anyways, Deborah Crondren takes a look at women progressing through the workforce and seeing how women have difficulties breaking stigmas and barriers in the workforce. For example, women who are seen as strong leaders, or who should be seen as strong leaders, can be seen as bitchy, awful people, or mothers. For some reason, as soon as a woman is doing something wrong or slightly different than other women, she is a bad mother. I don't know what that's all about, the patriarchy. But ultimately, being a young woman in my 20s and wanting to have a very meaningful and long-lasting, hopefully, career, I want to read as many of these books as I can to propel me to be ambitious and not be scared to be ambitious in the workforce. Next up is Bitch by Elizabeth Wurtzel. Very much so along the lines of what I was just saying, we need to praise difficult women, and that is exactly what this book does. There's something about feminist books or female empowering books that make me think, hey, that book has a very meaningful message. It would be bad of me to not buy it. Because I personally know very little about the actual content of this book, here is a brief synopsis that it says on the back here. A fascinating tract on the history of female behavior and how it has been interpreted and misinterpreted, Bitch is among the most entertaining feminist manifestos ever written. So it looks like there's lots of stories about women scorned and trying to make a name for themselves in this world, and I cannot wait to read this book. I don't know why it has been sitting on my shelf for so long. My very last book for today is Women as Weapons of War by Kelly Oliver. There is a sentence in the synopsis on the back of this book that sums up the contents of this book, or what I think the contents of this book will be, very well. It says, Kelly Oliver reveals how the media and the George W. Bush administration used metaphors of weaponry to describe women and female sexuality and forge a link between vulnerability and violence. One of my dear friends from my undergraduate degree actually recommended me this book when she read it, and this was a little while ago, and she really encouraged me to read it, and then there was an issue with me acquiring this book because it was sold out everywhere, and finally after a couple months I managed to get this book, and I think at that point for me it was the thrill of the chase, so I bought it, I owned it, and then it just sat next to my other criminology books for a little while. Now, at the time when I got this book, I wasn't super interested necessarily in the Middle East, and that's what a lot of this book focuses around, women in the Middle East, but like I was saying earlier, I'm starting to get into a little bit more of fiction that takes place in the Middle East, and actually a few non-fiction books as well that I read late last year. So I feel that now is really the time for me to pick this up, and it really has all the makings of an amazing book for me. So again, like all the other books here that I've talked about today, I have no idea why I have not read it yet. So those 7 books have been sitting on my bookshelf for the longest time compared to any of my other books, and I have no idea where to start. So if you have any recommendations or any thoughts, opinions, or feelings about which of these 7 books I should start with, please let me know and I will add it into my TBR for June. Before I sign off, I just want to say a really big thank you to Josh from Literary Gladiators. You gave us such a thoughtful shout out on your channel. You were very kind to do so. Thank you so much. And thank you for being with us since day 1. Feathers video is going to be coming out on Saturday. And of course, Roses, as always, will be coming out the following Monday. So have a great night. Happy reading, everyone. I think I'm very overtired today.